We're back for the rest of the Halloween franchise. We're gonna knock these things out, parts 6 through 11. So, yeah, let's jump right into part 6. Pretty disastrous film. Now, I didn't really talk about part 5, how the director, who had no understanding or interest in the franchise, just got the job, tried to inject this weird mythology by having the man in black, the silver studded shoes, walking around, and then he kills all the cops at the end, and they don't explain any of that. So it left a giant hand dangling loose end. And part 6 was foolhardy enough to try to explain what the hell was going on there. So 6, The Curse of Michael Myers, injects this whole cult mythology around Michael Myers. The cult of the thorn. Michael is this instrument of sacrifice. They're trying to bring balance to the world by killing a bunch of people. It's actually kind of references part 3, the whole thing about the sacrifices during Samhain. But part 6 is frustrating because there's a good movie in there. There is. It's well shot. The kills are solid. I really like the DJ's kill where he's dangling on the tree and the blood's falling on the little girl. Like the abusive asshole dad's death where his head explodes. It's good stuff. But this movie is an editing nightmare. Whether you watch the theatrical cut or the producer's cut, there's 2 cuts. They both are just a mess. I don't believe this movie was finished. I think that they got close enough and said, we're not giving you any more money. Just cut something together and release this POS. It's just a mess. And this is very much a Dimension film. Dimension Films was the horror wing of Miramax Films. Miramax Films is the major indie studio crossover company that released movies like Clerks and Pulp Fiction in the 90s. It was very, very successful and ran by the Weinsteins. Everyone hates them. So the big problem with Dimension Films, other than being run by a sexual predator, is that Dimension Films had a bad reputation pretty much right off the bat from constantly interfering with their movies. They would demand reshoots, rewrites, re-edits. They had just terrible reputation for treating their filmmakers badly. And Halloween 6, ironically, is directed by Joe Chappell, who had previously done Hellraiser Bloodline for Dimension Films. And he had essentially finished Hellraiser Bloodline after that movie's director stormed off the set. He got so frustrated with the company, Kevin Yeager. And now that I think about it, given the release schedule, it's possible Hellraiser Bloodline was shot after Halloween 6. I'm not sure. But I believe they were both released in 1996, so it's hard to say. So Joe Chappell knew that Dimension Films was a nightmare to work with, and I guess he just didn't care because he continued working with them. But Halloween 6 has 2 edits, and it doesn't really matter which one you watch because it's the same basic story, just structured a little differently. The producer's cut is a bit more coherent, but neither one's good. It's just not a finished film. It feels like there are scenes missing, regardless of which version you watch. So Danielle Harris was supposed to reprise her role from Halloween 4 and 5 as Jamie Lloyd. And Jamie Lloyd is a character in Halloween 6, but Danielle Harris actually was told that they couldn't hire her because she was a minor. She was still only 17 at the time. So she got herself emancipated from her parents so she could be considered an adult. I guess her parents were cool with it. And then she gets the movie, she does all this stuff, like, okay, I'm an adult, I can do the movie. Then she got the script. And she essentially said, no, I don't want to do this movie. She didn't like that Jamie Lloyd was getting raped by Michael Myers. She didn't like that she has Michael Myers' child. She didn't like that she died so early. Jamie Lloyd lives a bit longer in the producer's cut, but either way, she dies before the halfway point. So yeah, she noped out and she got replaced by some actress I'm not familiar with. Actor I am familiar with is Paul Rudd, the Ant-Man himself. Isn't it great when these big stars have like this one horror flick randomly in their their filmography from when they get started. So he's playing Tommy Doyle, the little boy from part one, and apparently they actually tried to reach out to the child actor that had played the kid in the original flick, and they couldn't find him. They just didn't know where he was. Pre-internet, it was not easy to find people. So they got Paul Rudd, and it says introducing Paul Rudd, even though he had been in Clueless before this, which is why I think this might have been filmed way earlier than it was released, because obviously there were production issues. Joe Chappell didn't like Donald Pleasance, and in fairness, Donald Pleasance is showing his age hardcore in this movie. He looks and sounds very old. He aged a lot between parts 5 and part 6. It's I believe there's 7 years between their releases. I don't know precisely when part 6 was filmed though. But yeah, he looks very old. He's not in it that much, even though he receives top billing. It's Paul Rudd's movie, and Paul Rudd's kind of miscast. This kind of dark and brooding badass character he's playing, that ain't Paul Rudd. But whatever. He's not terrible. And the cast is fine. The cinematography is really good. This is one of the better looking of the Halloween films. It's just a mess. The Cult of the Thorn has Michael raping Jamie Lloyd, and then she escapes, and Paul Rudd, character Tommy, and Dr. Loomis end up protecting her baby that she had with Michael Myers. And the Cult of the Thorn, there are two endings. One that implies Loomis either died or just realized Michael was still alive, and one that implies Loomis has been inducted unwillingly into the Cult of the Thorn. Either way, this flick is just a disaster. It's not the worst in the series, but that's only because Halloween Resurrection exists. And the funny thing is, I have a Halloween 6 t-shirt I bought because I thought it was really funny that they had even released a Halloween 6 shirt. I kind of like the poster. Speaking of posters, Halloween 5's poster is pretty good. Too bad it's a poster for Halloween 4. It has Jamie Lloyd in her clown costume, which she didn't wear in part 5. She wore it in part 4. That's great marketing. So, after this flick, the Halloween franchise was a bit of a joke. Parts 5 and 6 were very poorly received, so reboot time. Halloween 20 years later. Now, Halloween 20 years later is the movie where Jamie Lee Curtis finally said, you know what, I'll come back. She had just had a major hit with True Lies a couple of years earlier, and I think she realized that her career had kind of peaked. That it was probably going to be kind of a downhill thing from here on out. She had reached that age, that age where actors and actresses start getting roles that are for older people, and it means less leading roles, fewer major movies, and Jamie Lee Curtis mostly did independent films and television after Halloween 20 Years Later. It was kind of her last hurrah as a leading lady actress. But she's very good in the movie, and it's great seeing her return. It's great that her first scene also is her screaming, because she has a great scream. Not all women can scream like that, can do that horror movie scream. I worked with an actress that could not do it. Her voice didn't do it. Her scream was just a yell. Jamie Lee Curtis has a fantastic scream. It's great that they open her scene with that. I like the title. It's a cool title, H2O, Halloween 20 Years Later. Sad that Donald Pleasance died. I think that they would have liked to have him in that cameo at the beginning. Instead, we get his nurse. And it is cool that they brought that actress back, the nurse from 1 and 2 that was kind of his sidekick, especially in part 2. This movie has a good cast. You get Joseph Gordon-Levitt in the beginning as well. He's very charismatic. He has one of the funniest scenes in the movie where he's going through the nurse's house, which was Loomis's house before he died. He died in continuity of the film as well. They say Loomis is dead. But he smashes up her house with a hockey stick because he's so freaked out. That was pretty funny. And then he blames it on the Michael Myers. Then he gets it with a ice skate right in the face. It's a good death. It was an off-screen death, but it's still a brutal way to go out. Get Michelle Williams. This is pre-Oscar nominee Michelle Williams. This is Michelle Williams when she was still a TV star for Dawson's Creek. You get rapper LL Cool J. Get Josh Hartnett, Adam Arkin. So it's a solid cast. I'm going to say what anyone who has seen this movie says. Nothing happens in this movie. Halloween 20 Years Later is a flick about Michael Myers dragging ass to a college Laurie Strode now runs, which her rebellious son, Josh Hartnett, attends, and they're planning for a trip to Yosemite, and I just explained the first 2/3 of this movie. Nothing friggin' happens. It's so light on action. It's so light on casualties. By the time Michael finally becomes active, he hardly does anything. I think he only kills 3 people after the opening credits, after the opening titles. And most of those deaths are off camera. But yeah, it doesn't have many victims. It doesn't have much action. It doesn't have many scares. has this long sequence at a bathroom with a character that's not in the movie at all, where Michael steals her car. That scene goes on forever. And particularly weird about this is from the director of Friday the 13th Part 2. This guy did a Jason Voorhees film, and Friday the 13th 2 is a very action-packed film. So it's weird that he did such a lame duck movie. This movie was kind of a cash-in. It was made after Scream. Dimension Films, again, was trying very hard to cash in on the popularity of Scream and the late 90s youth horror boom. And some people discredit this movie just on the basis of that. They're like, oh, it has LL Cool J on it. LL Cool J's fine. He's kind of funny. He's a charismatic actor. I don't mind that he's in this movie. I mind that Busta Rhymes is in the next movie because he can't act with a shit, but LL Cool J's fine. The soundtrack, it's fine. If you like 90s rock, you'll like the soundtrack. If you don't, just tune it out. You know, it's not prevalent, really. It does have a few decent kills, particularly the one with Jodie Lynn O'Keefe, very attractive actress, in The Dumbwaiter. That was a cool kill. Really, you're killing time for about an hour and 15 minutes till Laurie Strode and Michael Myers face off. And when that happens, that's awesome. You know, Jamie Lee Curtis throws down in this movie. She's not the Laurie Strode that needs Loomis to protect her anymore. She's a grown woman. She's still troubled. You know, she's got a pill problem, but drinking issues as well. But she is harsh in this movie, and it's cool watching her really push. And the best scene of the whole movie is the final scene. Michael pinned down in a car accident. Help. And Laurie Strode like, nope. Decapitation. One of the better decapitations I've ever seen. And they ruined that in the next movie as well. Aside from that, what else can I say about this movie? Has the worst looking Michael Myers mask of all of them. The mask looks terrible. The eyes aren't right, so his eyes are always really bugged out and it looks silly. His hair is kind of frazzled. It's a really terrible mask. I don't know how anyone looked at that and thought that was okay. Aside from that, H2O is pretty forgettable. There was supposed to be a scene, I don't know if it was filmed, where Laurie Strode hears that her daughter, Jamie Lloyd, has died. And I'm not sure if why that was cut. I think it was just because they didn't want to even admit that parts 4 and 5 had happened, but it is interesting that this is supposed to be in continuity. A lot of people say that it retcons the other movies out of existence, but apparently it was supposed to be in continuity. Jamie Lloyd, Laurie Strode apparently became an alcoholic, just abandoned her kid, and faked her own death, and then Jamie Lloyd got murdered. That's sad. I don't like they killed Jamie Lloyd, but that didn't happen in this movie. So yeah, this is a pretty forgettable entry. It's really just only cool because you get to see Jamie Lee Curtis kind of throw down in it. And like I said, it has a good cast, a few good moments, but it's generally a fairly forgettable whatever of a movie. Halloween Resurrection is not, though. Now, Halloween Resurrection is actually directed by the guy who did Halloween 2. So I don't know how Rick Rosenthal fell so hard, because 2 is a perfectly solid movie. It's not great, but it's good enough. 8 is universally considered to be the worst of the film. The entire franchise. It's unnecessary, it's meandering, it's just a waste of time. Busta Rhymes is annoying in it. The stupid reality TV show thing is annoying, very dated. It dates the movie. The cast, the rest of the cast is okay-ish, but you know, most people consider it sacrilege the way they treat Laurie Strode in this movie. Jamie Lee Curtis was contractually obligated to return for another movie, and apparently the director, she had a good relationship with him, having worked with him in part 2, and she agreed to be in a little bit more than she was required to be. Nice of her, I guess. And they kill her in the first 10 minutes. Like, just stabs her, and she falls, and dead. No more Laurie Strode. Main character, beloved character, now we're just going to go ahead and offer her in the first 10 minutes like she doesn't matter. It's like I said, it's sacrilege. Honestly, this movie wouldn't get as much hate as it does if they had taken that opening and made that the ending. If that had been the final scene of the movie with Laurie Strode instead of that dumb jump cut where Michael Myers' eyes open, oh my god, he's not dead. I think people would give this a bit more of a pass as just, alright, fine, that's the end of this continuity. Like, people would be kind of okay with this movie. It still sucks, but yeah, that's what really kills it for people, I think. They wanted to do a sequel, and Busta Rhymes wanted to reprise his role. So cinema missed out on the opportunity to see him say, "Trick or treat, motherfucker," again! He's terrible. Tyra Banks is in this movie, too, for a little bit, and her death is off-screen, but I believe it was filmed, because I've seen production stills of her on camera with Michael Myers, but she gets dangled from some wires. This is not a big part. Aside from that, Sean Patrick Thomas was a dick. He's listed as special appearance by, even though he's a prominent supporting character. Sean Patrick Thomas, who was famous at the time for doing an interracial romance drama called Save the Last Dance with Julia Stiles, and he was kind of doing what an actor who's mad at a production does. He was kind of sabotaging the production. He was going around giving all these plot points out during the press junket. I still remember that. He was a prick, and I kind of killed his career because I don't remember seeing him much after this. Anyway, Halloween Resurrection, excuse me. Halloween Resurrection, universally considered to be the worst of the series. You know, it has the lowest IMDb rating. It's just a bad movie. So the franchise went dead again until the remake boom of the 2000s, which was started by the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Dawn of the Dead, which were both big hits. So the studios started grabbing up every property they could get their hands on. We're gonna remake Hills Have Eyes. We're gonna remake The Fog. We're gonna remake what else came out? Every J horror movie that came out in the last 10 years. We're gonna remake all of them. So and they wanted to remake Halloween. And Rob Zombie. Now Rob Zombie is a very controversial filmmaker now. But coming off The Devil's Rejects, which is universally considered to be his best movie, he was a hot commodity. And he really, he took a lot of he gave a lot of pitches. He was actually attached to a remake of The Blob at one point, which I wish I had seen because the production, the concept art for the Rob Zombie's Blob remake was really cool. But he kept not getting it, and then he finally got drug in on Halloween, and it was because Dimension Films wanted to hire Rob Zombie. They wanted the kind of the hottest horror filmmaker of the moment. And basically, it was him and Eli Roth were the two guys. So they got Zombie attached to Halloween, and they kind of told him, "We just want you to make a Rob Zombie movie." And he wanted to do a prequel, but they said, "Nah, you can't just make a movie about young Michael. It's got to have the key elements, the mask. It's got to have Laurie Strode, all this." So he kind of mashed his prequel concept together with the original flick, and it's a little like Batman Begins is what it kind of reminds me of. Is that like Batman Begins, the first Christian Bale, Christopher Nolan Batman movie, it feels like kind of two movies. It's a very clear divide between Michael's youth and Michael's killing spree. Not that his youth didn't include killing spree also. But, like I said, Zombie's a controversial guy, and this movie has the issues that most of his movies have, which is that the redneck thing, which some people don't like. I don't mind it, but some people don't like it. It has some misplaced humor, which actually does hurt the movie a bit. But I like this movie. I do. I actually think it's one of the better remakes that came out of all the remakes that came out in the 2000s. It's one of the better ones. It's ambitious. It tells a story. And some people say it's a little too obvious that Michael Myers was just, he had the background that most serial killers have. If you look into serial killers' backgrounds, he was in an abusive home. His mom was she was a stripper. His mom's boyfriend was physically abusive. His sister was trashy. And the sister is played by Jen A. from Forrest Gump. Anyone know that? Hannah Wade or Hannah Ware, I don't remember what her name is. It's one of those two. But she was little girl Jenny in Forrest Gump. She had one of the most famous lines in 90s cinema history. She had, "Run, Forrest, run." That was her. That's little Jenny grown up to do a bunch of nude scenes and they get stabbed to death in Rob Zombie's Halloween. It's kind of interesting. Child actors, man. Speaking of child actors, we get Danielle Harris all grown up in this movie. Also naked, also stabbed. And I love Danielle Harris. Apparently, Zombie actually originally wanted this movie to star Danielle Harris as Laurie Strode. He wanted Danielle Harris as Laurie Strode. He wanted his wife as, I think, Annie Brackett, which I guess he was looking at Sherry Moon Zombie through those love goggles. He was seeing her as he sees her. Like, don't cast your 35-year-old wife as a high schooler. That's not going to work out. People are going to laugh at you, and thank God they didn't let him do that. He also wanted Sid Haig, the clown, Captain Spaulding from House of a Thousand Corpses, to play Loomis. Sid Haig ends up having a very small cameo, and he got Malcolm McDowell to play Loomis. Malcolm McDowell's great in this movie. Malcolm McDowell is a fantastic actor. He's got a billion movies to his resume. He's very famous for A Clockwork Orange, and Caligula, and then he just kind of kept working. Class of 1999, Blue Thunder, Star Trek Generations, just a ton of stuff to his name. And this is one of the better roles he's gotten in the later part of his career when he kind of got into professional cameo territory. When people would just hire Malcolm McDowell to have him in 2 or 3 scenes so they could say, "Hey, look, we got the guy from Clockwork Orange in this movie." This is a leading role. He's very good in this movie. I like his Loomis. I like the fact that he plays Loomis like kind of an asshole. He's kind of arrogant, he's kind of a prick, but he does really care about Michael's well-being. And you see that in some scenes where he feels bad for this kid, this child, but he also exploits him. He exploits the whole thing to write a book. excuse me. This movie, so the whole beginning of the movie is Michael's childhood, which leads into he wears the iconic clown costume, and I have no idea what decade this childhood is supposed to take place in. It looks like the 70s, but time-wise, it's got to be the 90s. This is because Scout Taylor contemplates Laurie Strode. She's only in her teens, so it couldn't have been that far back. So I don't know. I guess Haddonfield was really behind the times in the 90s because everyone's wearing 70s clothes, 70s hair, 70s technology. But fine, whatever. So we jump ahead. We get the killing spree. It plays out pretty much the same as it did in the original film, only with more gore and nudity and cursing. Get some good acting though. Brad Dourif is good as Sheriff Brackett. I actually like him more than the original Sheriff Brackett. I like a lot of big cast in this movie. Christina Cleave, Danielle Harris, Scout Taylor Compton's good as Laurie. Scout Taylor Compton was a child actress as well, and she was just starting to grow up. And she kind of has that child actor's curse of, I mean, the woman is like 30 now, and she still sounds and looks like she's 19. And that kind of hurts your career at a point. Like she just recently played a high schooler in a movie that I don't remember the name of, but I did see. And yeah, it doesn't. Her career really didn't. She's a scream queen now. She does a lot of horror flicks, but she hasn't ever really kind of been able to branch out beyond that. And it's because she looks and sounds so young. It's just she can't play a lawyer. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, this flick's generally pretty good. The ending, which Zombie was forced to reshoot, sucks. I don't like the Michael just smashing up the house. The original ending, where he would have a confrontation with the police, where Loomis tries to talk him down, and then would get shot, and Loomis would kind of feel responsible for it, which is more or less the ending Zombie used for his sequel, which I do love. I love the ending of Zombies Halloween 2. The rest of the movie, but I love the ending. The director's cut, the actual cut, not as good. So, yeah, the ending's not very good. There's some problems along the way. Danny Trejo, who's actually really good in this movie, Machete himself is very good in this movie. He's Brindley Orderly. But his death sucks. It goes on way too long. It's just stupid. Some of the cameos are kind of distracting. Like, hey, look, there's Ken Frey. But overall, I like this movie. That gets us to Halloween 2. Now, Halloween 2, there are 3 Halloween movies that are more or less universally hated. That's Halloween 6, Halloween 8, Halloween 6, which was basically unfinished, Halloween 8, which was just pandering and terrible, and Zombies Halloween 2. That's because I get the feeling, well, Rob Zombie didn't want to make the movie, first of all. He said after the first movie he wasn't going to make another one. And then they kind of, they backed that dump truck of money up to his house and kind of said, you sure you don't want to make another one? And so he's like, fine. And there was ridiculously fast turnaround. He did the whole movie, like from writing it to finishing the film in less than a year, which is insane. That's insane for an indie, let alone a big studio release. And it shows it was written too fast. There's much like Halloween 2, the original Halloween 2, with Jamie Lee Curtis. There's a whole lot of not enough plot. Yeah, the whole first 20 some odd minutes of it is a dream sequence that's really just an homage to the original Halloween 2, with Laurie Strode being stalked by Michael in a hospital that he just decimates. He kills everybody. And then you get a cameo from Caroline Williams from Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 in there. You get a cameo from Octavia Spencer, who either was nominated or won an Oscar. I can't remember which, but she was in The Help, and then she was in Mama, that horror flick that came out a couple of years ago. Fairly famous actress. A cameo from her in it. The whole scene goes on forever, and it's just like, why is this so long? Dr. Loomis very much feels like a special guest star in this movie. He is so unrelated to the plot of the movie until the very end. You could actually cut every scene Malcolm McDowell's Dr. Loomis is in, except for the book signing scene, just to establish that he's on his book tour. The scene where he's being interviewed by Chris Hardwick, playing himself, where he kind of betrays Sheriff Brackett's trust and reveals that Laurie's Michael's sister. And then his final scene in where he tries to talk Michael down in the shack. The whole thing with the white horse and Michael's hallucinations is just kind of Zombie having fun. It doesn't. That's the thing with this movie. This movie, more than any other film in the franchise, does not feel like a Halloween movie at all. Now, people say, well, it's Rob Zombie's Halloween, and that's fair, but you probably don't want to divert this far. Like, Michael doesn't wear his iconic clothes except in the dream sequence. And the rest of the movie's in this tattered, he looks like a hobo. Like, he's in this tattered hoodie, his mask is all torn up, he's got this big beard. He looks like a deranged homeless person, which he kind of is. But, if Michael has such an established look, you probably don't want to completely change it. The hallucinations are very outside of what we've seen in anything else in these movies. I can't remember anything really like that in any of the others. I'm forgetting something maybe, but I don't think so. It's all his hallucinations, where his mom, who's Sherry Moon Zombie, who's dressed up like the Living Dead girl from that Rob Zombie music video, that's distracting as hell. People complain about the horse. I found the makeup on Sherry Moon Zombie distracting because it's the makeup from the music video of his biggest hit single, Living Dead. It's distracting as all hell. I don't know why they did it at all. I also don't know why they recast the kid who played Michael Myers. I mean, he couldn't have aged that much, could he? And this kid doesn't look anything like the first kid. This kid looks like a TV sitcom son, not that ugly weirdo with the stringy death metal hair. So yeah, that's not great. But you do get Malcolm McDowell, he's good. Brad Dourif's back, he's good. Danielle Harris is back. They don't really do anything with her, but she's back. Yeah, that was kind of a waste bringing her back just for nothing. But her death sequence is great. Yeah, because her death and her dad, Sheriff Brackett's reaction to her death are some of the best stuff in the series. When the way she reacts, that's her worst nightmare. This guy almost killed her. This guy sexually assaulted her. Like, this is her nightmare, and this is her father's nightmare too. Can you imagine how impotent you would feel as a parent to know that your child had been attacked by a guy a year ago, and then that guy came back and finished her off in your own home? Like, God, that just... and Brad Dourif sells it so well. He looks so heartbroken. It's great. The third act of this movie is actually really good. What gets you there just is... You're basically just watching Laurie Strode have a nervous breakdown around Halloween. And some people have said that Laurie Strode comes across as annoying. I didn't think so, but I like Scout Taylor Compton, but I could see that, because she is basically just a train wreck in this movie. The kills... I don't like when horror movies introduce a character and then kill them in the same scene, and this movie does that a few times, and I feel like that's just lazy. You take some time to establish these characters. Don't just show me someone so you can kill them immediately. That's kind of lame. Bill Moseley, who played Otis Driftwood in The Devil's Rejects and all those movies, was supposed to play Uncle Seymour Coffins, the cheesy horror host that's in this movie for no reason. But he, due to scheduling conflicts, he was unable to complete the role, and they ended up using Jeff Daniel Phillips, who plays the asshole bouncer at the strip club, to play Seymour Coffins. So he actually has two roles in this movie. Daniel Roebuck returns as the guy who runs the strip club, the Red Rabbit Lounge, that Michael's mom used to work at, and he was in the first movie for like 2 seconds. Like, literally you see him for 2 seconds, but he's in this movie for more room, for more time. One of my friends who saw this loved the scene, because he would walk around quoting it, you're gonna get fucked by Frankenstein. He loved that part. Yeah, I like the ending a lot. I like that Michael speaks, because his hatred for Loomis, how betrayed he feels by Loomis, is what propels that, and I really like that. But, this is an unpopular film, and I understand why. And that gets us to the final one. David Gordon Green, I think is that guy's name, David Gordon Green, and Danny McBride got a wild hair up their asses one day and said, you know what, we're going to take a break from stoner comedies and make a Halloween film. Now, I hate two things about this movie right off the bat. I hate that it has the title Halloween. This is a sequel. Why'd you do that? Why is it called Halloween? Why is it not called Halloween Legacy? Why is it called Halloween Laurie Strode? Why is it not called anything? Michael's Myth, like anything, just anything. That's stupid. It just makes it confusing. Which Halloween are you talking about? Halloween 2018? Zombies Halloween? Just at least a remake. There's a reason that's called Halloween. Or it's stupid. And I hate that they retcon all the other movies. Like, okay, you don't want Michael to be Laurie's brother anymore. Why? Why does that really impact anything? If you don't like that, just don't focus on it. It completely alters the timeline of the character. I hate that. I hate that. This movie is actually fairly divisive, but it was beloved by critics, and I think it was beloved by critics because it is probably the best shot of all the Halloween movies, except for the first one. It's got great cinematography, it's well made, it's got pretty okay kills. It's a sloppy ass mess of a script. It really is. Like, I swear this movie was rewritten heavily when it was made, because all that setup with the podcasters at the beginning goes nowhere. It goes absolutely nowhere. So why all that stuff there? All of those characters are out. The whole idea that they're doing this podcast on Michael's crimes from 1977, which actually makes sense. Some people say it doesn't make sense, because why would anyone care about a random murder that happened in 77 if we're retconning all the other crimes? He only killed like 4 people. Well, yeah, but that's still a story, and this is a podcast. It's not even a TV show. I could see some low-level podcasters that live in Illinois saying, I remember there was this time this escaped mental patient broke out and killed like 3 teenagers and a gas station attendant, and they shot him and arrested him, and he's still alive. And I could see that. the part where they hold up his mask to him, now that feels like an iconic killer, so that doesn't make any sense. But now, it's kind of a cool scene, but it doesn't make any sense because who cares about Michael Myers? He's a minor spree killer from 40 years ago. I don't like that Michael is so old. You know, they even mentioned that in 20 years later, that he's kind of old to still be doing this. But in this movie, is he in his 60s? You Walker in a wheelchair, for God's sake. I don't buy Jamie Lee Curtis's Laurie Strode in this movie. It's stupid to me that she looks like a retired librarian, and she's out there kicking ass and taking names. Like, she falls off a house at one point and is fine. Like, this woman is in her 60s. That would have shattered her. I don't like this movie. A lot of people do, but a lot of people don't. That's the kind of the thing. John Carpenter's back to do his a version of his original score, which isn't changed that much. He brought his son. He and his son now do music pretty much exclusively. He doesn't seem to have any interest in doing film anymore. He even turned down Halloween 20 years later. He was offered the chance to direct it and just, nah. So, yeah, this flick is Halloween 20... it's almost literally a remake of Halloween 20 years later. And it is much better made, but it just has a lot of things I didn't like in it. I didn't like the bit where the idiot father leaves his son, daughter, I honestly don't know the gender of this kid, in the car to go check on a busload of escaped mental patients. What kind of parent are you? The part where the the doctor turns Michael loose is stupid. It comes out of nowhere and it's dropped immediately. That was a wasted plot thread that just adds nothing to the film. The girl, Laurie's granddaughter, is fine. She's alright. I haven't seen her in anything before or since, but she's okay. The cast is pretty solidly okay. Will Patton, Judy Greer. Judy Greer is just being Judy Greer. She's the same and everything. But I just didn't care for this movie. They're making another one called Halloween Kills. It'll get released some point. You know, we're kind of in a dry spot as far as releases go. But yeah, this franchise is like looking at the EEG of a man having a heart attack. You know, because most franchises, you have a good movie, an okay movie, a good movie, a bad, you know. This movie's like, good movie, great movie, okay, bad, awful, okay, bad, awful. You know, it's just all over the place. You never know what you're going to get with these things. And I guess that's kind of the fun of it, but it is probably the most unpredictable franchise in history, because you have Halloween 6, terrible. Halloween 7, okay. Halloween 8, terrible. Remake, pretty good. Sequel to the remake, generally not liked at all. Yeah, it's so across the board unpredictable. It's kind of amazing. And I'm not trying to trash the Halloween franchise. I like some of these movies, and I love the first one. And, you know, I'm a Texas Chainsaw Massacre fan, and I love all those movies. And some of those movies are considered to be literally among the worst movies ever made. So I know what it is to have something you love shit on. So Halloween movies have a great following. A lot of people like all of them. I don't know if there are a lot of people that like all of them, but a lot of people like most of them. And Michael Myers is an iconic character, and justifiably so. John Carpenter changed the landscape of horror forever with this franchise, and it's remained vital. When Resurrection came out, I actually remember hearing a friend of mine talk about it with his dad, who had seen the original Halloween in theaters, and his dad told him, you know, your kids are going to be watching Halloween 20 years from now. And he was right. Like, here we are 15 years after Resurrection, and they're still making them. So, it's a classic. It's an unpredictable series. It's got its ups. It's got its downs. But who knows? Maybe Halloween Kills will be awesome. I think that's a terrible title, by the way. Just saying. It could be great. I don't know. That's all I got.